Hello, I'm Dan Nicholl and welcome to Boschendal the Nicholas Red Blazer series, where together with Maponyane, I meet 8 different South African entrepreneurs and tell their stories. This week it's a particularly interesting story, a young woman who seemed to have a future as a scientist, instead discovering her true passion lay in cleaning. Hello and welcome to one of the coolest centres of art in South Africa. This is the private gallery at Ellerman House, and it's where I find myself for today's episode of Boschendal the Nicholas Red Blazer series. As always, the chiselled figure of Maponyane with me, but so too somebody who, even by the standards of the entrepreneurs we've met on this series, has had a rather remarkable journey. Aisha Pandor, welcome. Lovely to have you with us.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
I was trying to plug this in earlier, Maps. If you think of the world of, let's call it domestic management, the cleaning business that Sweep South now is, if I was thinking, what would somebody do if they wanted to go into that? The thing that comes automatically to mind is a PhD in human genes and genealogy. I mean, that probably came straight to you as well.
Yeah, I mean, human genetics PhD seems like a natural progression into domestic management. Quite a genius and an incredible mind that we do have on the episode today. And I must say, someone who is terribly interesting, because for me to be in an art gallery, and you know how obsessed I am with art, but to be purely interested in the woman that we have here joining us today is something quite special.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, so obviously an unconventional start to a career in technology, but I think started with studying what I was studying and really enjoying it from an intellectual point of view, but also reflecting as I was finishing up my PhD on what are the things that I can do to better contribute to the issues that South Africa faces. I'm a firm believer in the power of technology and scalable technology to make an impact in the world. And we, by chance, came across the idea for Sweep South when our nanny was unavailable and we needed to find a stand-in stat. And there wasn't really a solution. And we thought, let's build an Uber for home services. And in doing that, we'd hopefully be able to positively impact the many, many domestic workers and other home service providers who are looking for employment, so who are unemployed or underemployed. And that's how it came about.
You make it sound so remarkably simple, just casually. Well, I'll just build an Uber for domestic services and away we go. Clearly so much more went to it than that. Before we talk about the development of the business though, go back to the studying days, the choice of studying what you did and the kind of skills that equipped you with to now lead you into this very exciting world you find yourself in today.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, because I think like many young people had this idea that you go to school, you're good at something at school, you study it for university, and then you become that, and that's your career going forward. Whereas the world is very different today. And in the sense of research and the things that I learned, there was obviously the sort of content of it, which is unfortunately not that useful in a Sweep South content. But some of the skills that I learned around focus, around being able to defend ideas, which you have to do as a researcher, and which you have to do as an entrepreneur when you're pitching, and first actually defend them to yourself. So critical thinking, logical reasoning, those skills have really followed through. Time management, a huge one. Probably have sort of swung the other way as an entrepreneur and kind of, have issues probably more with sort of burnout and work-life balance than not enough work. But certainly things that you have to learn, while you're studying. And then I think one of the things that I was surprised about that I had done during my research that's actually been very useful in building Sweep South is we had experiments, and you do one experiment and you get results, and then that would take you to the next one. And what we did in the early days of building Sweep South, and still do a lot now, is experiment and iterate based on the results of those experiments. So it's actually been surprisingly useful.
Now, I'm a bit of a fanboy, and I'm fascinated by your mind and why you take certain decisions. My grandmother has terrible eyesight, and so does my mother, and so do I. And you did your thesis on hereditary blindness, so I have a bit of a personal attachment to you more than you know. Why did you decide to go down that path?
I'm firstly just the idea of sort of genetics and how they influence us, I think is incredibly interesting. I don't know how many people kind of look at themselves in the mirror and go, why from a biological point of view am I the way that I am? And then with inherited blindness, I was really drawn by the idea that you could fix something that is in people's genetics that causes you to essentially go blind over time. So the disease that I was studying, retinitis pigmentosa, is a hereditary disease where you know that your parents or uncles and aunts have it, you know that your grandparents have it, you're not sure if you have it in many cases, but you know that if you get it, you'll start losing sight from your teens and it'll progress from there and eventually you'll go completely blind. And I just thought that must be horrendous to be a young person and have that sort of future ahead of you, and to be able to try and fix problems like that, I thought would be awesome. Which is another thing actually that links sort of my research to starting a business, is the idea of understanding a problem space really well and then trying to solve it. I'm a big problem solver.
There's also a wonderful irony to you having studied that particular space and then having the vision to start the space that you did now. You're clearly a very intelligent person. You don't do PhDs if you're not, but this was a completely different space, and you certainly saw a problem. Fixing that problem, dealing with it is something else entirely. Yeah. How much more of a challenge was getting Sweep South off the ground than you perhaps anticipated?
So much harder. So much harder. I mean, a PhD is difficult. It takes years. It takes a lot of grit and hard work and focus, and it's very intellectually challenging. Building a business is all of that and more. It's incredibly difficult. You are, especially if you're trying to do something that's innovative, you've really got to feel passionate about the purpose of why you're doing what you're doing, because it's difficult to get customers. You always have this vision of how things are going to pan out. It never works out that way. It's difficult to get investors on board. It's difficult to learn to sell yourself. You've got to be so multifaceted. You've got to be a marketer, financials. You've got to be ahead of. You've got to know how to manage people. You've got to keep on growing yourself as your business grows. So it's been incredibly challenging, but at the same time incredibly rewarding. And I think there's also a satisfaction in knowing that the sort of work that you're doing is work that is meaningful in the context of our country and again the challenges that we face.
You have a lot of convincing to do, I'm assuming, at the start of this journey. Yeah. It's tough to get customers on board, but it's probably tougher to get family on board. Yes. Convincing your mother and father, yes. Convincing your partner, I'm sure at the time, especially after putting in so many hours into your PhD. Yeah. When was the breakthrough of that and realizing now I'm finally actually making headway in this, and everyone else started backing you and saying, okay, you made the right decision?
It took a while. So, I mean, it was tough. And I think, there was a lot of sort of wait and see. Fortunately, I'm a very stubborn person, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on who you ask. But I'm very stubborn. And I think this is a characteristic of a lot of entrepreneurs. And my family in particular were not really happy with the idea that, I'd spent 10 years studying and now I was going in a completely different direction to start what they understood as, and this was back in 2013, 2014, as basically a cleaning company. So, you've left your PhD to start a cleaning company. And, didn't really get the scale of it. And I think as we started to grow and start to give them feedback on the people whose lives we were impacting and gain investment and start to sort of, get featured in publications, I think people eventually started to see, okay, this is what you're trying to build. It's, it's something bigger than what we originally thought. And I think in my mom's case in particular, I remember this moment. She was very skeptical. And then we did a cover with Forbes Africa, Forbes Woman Africa magazine. And when I showed her the article, she said, okay, now I kind of get it. I'll cut you a bit of slack.
Which leads to the question of success and what that means to you from the outside looking on. Yeah. You're in half a dozen cities, you've moved into Kenya, I think there might be another country on the horizon, you're part of a great piece of Silicon Valley recognition. Those are all markers that from the outside say, gee, you're doing really well. But for you personally, you've started all this. What says to you, this is success, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing?
Yeah. It's a tough one, and it's something that I've thought about a lot, especially over the last 18 months or so, because I think I've had to, in the absence of the sort of aggressive growth that we've wanted to pursue during the pandemic, I've had to really ask myself, like, what does success mean? And personally, it means it's an in-the-moment thing. So, success is not, it's become less about sort of looking ahead. It's more sort of, what am I doing right now? And so, to me, it's a synergy between working with people who, again, feel passionate and mission aligned to what you're trying to do and motivated. It's feeling that, the impact piece of what you're doing resonates with, your being and your own values. And then I think it's constant growth. But I think, again, doesn't need to be the sort of idea of, building a $1 billion business in however many years, which I probably would have said if you'd asked me 18 months ago. But I think it's more just about, consistent growth, surrounded by happy, motivated, mission-aligned people, and just feeling an internal sense of happiness.
From having seen a lot of your kind of media interactions and seen you and I guess your communication of what you try and bring across as much as possible with Sweep South, and being a Sweep South customer myself, yeah. I see that it's a really important thing for you to be able to empower women on the platform.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not success to you as a whole if you don't bring people with you
100%.
Along for your journey.
Yeah.
Why is that so important for you? And especially with the focus of, I guess, reaching the ability to get the potential out of women that you're surrounded by.
Yeah, and I think it speaks back to that point about your work being values aligned. And I'm constantly asking myself, why did I leave genetics? Why did I leave? I had a very short stint in the corporate world, which looked promising before I left. So why did I leave that to do this? And I think, again, just going to that question around what are your own values? I come from a family where having an impact on the country and on the world around you is very important. My parents being apartheid activists, grandparents, great-grandparents. And so my values are really tied to the idea of making a positive impact on people's lives. And particularly women, because I think, I'm a mom, I juggle so much. I think if you've got women who are empowered, they have families who are empowered and who brought up by, strong, empowered, capable women. And that has huge knock-on impacts. And so that's an incredibly important part of Sweep South, and also part of the definition of success. So again, speaking to sort of my own values, being able to see these thousands and thousands of women, 25,000 of them so far, who say that I'm able to take care of my family and send my kids to school because of what this platform is doing. That's really, really rewarding.
Which seems like a way that she's utilized her PhD to try and create some hereditary success and empowerment.
Oh dear, the jokes don't get any better on this show, do they, Mr. Maponyane? I think the two levels of innovation that you show, there's your personal innovation. You've decided to do something to your mother's horror that's completely different, but you've also found a space that works so well. And that speaks quite nicely to our winemaker, Jacques Villiers, over at Boschendal. Jacques, for you as a winemaker, the art of innovation, coming up with, as you have with the Nicholas, a new and different red blend, how challenging is it? How much fun is it? And what governs you deciding that this is the new type of wine, the new style of wine that I'm going to be making?
Dan, that's a mouthful. Okay, let me think about it. But in fact, I don't have to think about it too much. Look, if you do winemaking and you do the type of job that I'm doing, you are inspired the whole time. Just the other day, we went up to the vineyards there next to Bosch, where we're actually developing some of our newer plantings in the Helderberg. And that by itself is so inspirational because you are working with top-end Syrah, top-end Bordeaux varietals, Cabernet Sauvignon. It's Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Cabernet Franc country. So, the dreams, they all start there. I often say a lot of my inspiration actually comes from training, cycling, mountain biking in between the vineyards. Somehow some of the ideas will spark up. Obviously, we continuously taste with Florent Demois, who is our French consultant. And so it's often, you get different ideas. We taste with other winemakers, they inspire you. There's a saying, Eyster slyp eyster, iron sharpens iron. So from the team side as well, you're inspired with people that you work with, people that's passionate about wine. So that's all inspirational thoughts. How much fun? Yes, how much fun can it be? You're out there in the vineyards, sampling, tasting, awesome sunlight on your skin, giving you some awesome vitamin D, if that's the correct one, but just you've got all these feel-good hormones being out there. So fun, it's absolutely amazing. You've got so many different pockets, working with the best possible grapes in the Stellenbosch region, in the Elgin region, and in fact, the best pockets of grapes in the Cape Coastal region. So that is all very inspiring to make some awesome wines. And then, I often say stuff like Nicholas or the Stellenbosch Cab, it all starts with a dream. And they say dangerous is the man who dreams with his eyes open. And that's exactly what happens when we make these type of wines and stuff. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. And I think I'm quite a positive guy. So I love food, I love wine, I love the outdoors, and all of those things actually just helps me to think up new wines and to taste and then to put them together.
Well, there we go. Well, it is certainly innovative. It's one that I particularly like, and it's one that I shall happily raise a glass to the success of our very special guest, T. So I have to say thank you, not just for being with us on the show, Aisha, and Matt, cheers to a great guest, but also thank you from my wife, who finds you not only particularly inspirational, but tends to quote and reference you on a regular basis when she mysteriously finds my pajamas sitting on the bedroom floor. Or, you need to be more Sweep Southish, she will tell me. You found this space and you've created something that's worked really, really well. It's always impossible to bottle success and pass it on to somebody else to use. But if you could sum up for you what's really made this project work, the heart of it, the DNA, so to speak, what would that be?
I think there are a few things. So I think it's really important that you gear up your knowledge and try and understand the space that you're going to get into. I'm not a software engineer. I'm not someone who, prior to Sweep South was very deeply entrenched in the tech space. So I think, I really, really embedded myself. I learned how to code at a very basic level, but learned how to code. So I made sure I understood the space and ecosystem that I was in. Working hard is unfortunately unavoidable as an entrepreneur, and it's incredibly important. So commitment and accountability and ownership and putting in the hard graft. And then I think just having great partners has been an incredible source of support and has been a big factor in our growth, and that's employees, investors, my co-founder who is my husband, so he was okay with the idea, and has been obviously a key part of the journey. But I think having good people around you, and then the last thing I think fourth is again just that mission alignment. So asking yourself, what am I good at? How does that align to what I enjoy and what my values are? And if those two things are in synergy, I think you can build a really, really great business.
It isn't always a easy flow and trajectory in building a great business, though. And on the show, we really like to highlight the full journey and the ups and the downs. What have been some of those notable challenges that you've had and struggles that you've had? I mean, the smallest thing I've seen you recently talk about was through networking, for example, and how you actually have quite a bit of anxiety when it comes to things such as that. You just you love for your work to show, to kind of show and bring those people to you rather than you going to find them. But what have been those challenges when you haven't been at that point where your work has been so excellent?
Yeah. So, I think one of the biggest things when you're trying to build something that is innovative and new is that people don't know who you are, and often they don't really know much about the solution that you're trying to give them. And so in the early days, even trying to tell people that there was a way to order home services using an app when Uber was still very new in South Africa was really difficult. And so trying to get into the psychology and kind of think about how do you convince people that you're legit, you're not a scam, that you are going to deliver what you say you're going to deliver, and that they should give you a try, and if the experience has gone well, refer to other people. And so that sort of idea of trying to market an innovation is incredibly difficult and took so much longer than we thought. We sort of had this view that we've had this problem. When we launch, the crowds are going to come flooding the platform, and it was absolute crickets in our first month. Second month, we had to bribe and beg people to book the platform. You know, we'll give you a free service. Please just try it out and let us know what you think. So that was really difficult, and having to realign expectations. Another unexpected challenge was how growing fast can actually be incredibly difficult. So about 2 years in, things are going well. We sort of cracked the customer acquisition piece. We know who our customers are, how to reach them and speak to them. And then they came flooding in, and we were unprepared for it. And I think many entrepreneurs think that, your first problem is going to be your problem forever, but problems evolve. And so we had to deal with, lots of unsatisfied customers, lots of apologies from me personally to people, and telling our customers or prospective customers how we were going to rectify the situation and make sure we weren't caught off guard in future. And then absolutely. I mean, I'm an introvert, scientist by nature. I had envisioned my career being me and cells in a petri dish, talking to each other all day long, which is not how things have panned out. And so I've had to get comfortable with putting myself out there and sort of trying to balance, trying to build a brand with also having, personal alone time to sort of think and recharge. And that can be difficult when you're an entrepreneur and you need to sort of be out there for everyone, your team, investors, networks, ecosystem, etc.
Your example that you said as an entrepreneur also has, for me, a really cool element in that we often think, if you're an entrepreneur, you've got to be Elon Musk, you're developing new ways to fly to the moon or do stuff that's really sci-fi-ish. Yeah. Whereas you've got something that's really rather mundane. It's cleaning a house, but it's such a fundamental aspect of the lives that we live. And sometimes I think entrepreneurs maybe look a little too big, and sometimes some of those opportunities are a little closer to home, maybe not as sexy, but they've certainly got some great potential. Yeah,
I mean, I think we need both. I think we need entrepreneurs who solve everyday problems or find new ways to crack or scale everyday problems. But I also think that we need big thinkers. I think you need companies like, SpaceX and Tesla to really push the boundaries of how we think. Are we going to be able to reach Mars in our lifetime? Probably not. But that thinking and that company and big thinking spurs a whole lot of creativity. It's inspirational. It spurs entire industries that are sort of based on that. So I think both are incredibly important. And the benefit in South Africa and in many other countries is you have both types of thinkers. So you have people who are sort of looking at their everyday world and they're sitting in traffic and going, I hate this. Isn't there a way to crack X challenge that I'm facing in my life? And then you have people, and often young kids, before they get taught not to think too ambitiously, but people who also think, crazy out there ideas. And I think both are incredibly important.
One of the biggest things I find from an entrepreneurial perspective is one key element that makes or breaks your startup as a whole. And whether it's a product or a service or whatever it may be, especially in what you do, it's particularly sensitive, especially in the South African context. How did you manage to get the consumer's trust?
Yeah. It was lots of work and evolution over time. I think, firstly, understanding who the consumer was. I think with many businesses, having the idea be a problem that you faced yourself is incredibly helpful, because when you're thinking about how to solve challenges for the consumer, you think about how to solve challenges for yourself. And so I've thought a lot about what would it take for me to trust someone coming into my home. And then obviously listening to customers to get feedback. And so we've done everything from, making sure that we have a big tag on our site and on our app that says, this is SSL secure, and we've gone through all of the necessary certifications to make sure that payments are secure, to the vetting that we do, extensive vetting that is far more than I think, the normal sort of person on the street would do when hiring someone to work for you privately. And then, the rating system as well has been incredibly helpful. And I think it's okay to borrow from what other companies have done. And so again, using Uber as a great example with the dual-sided ratings where, both customers and sweep stars have to be on their best behavior. That's worked really well in not just providing a sense of safety and security, but also just giving honest feedback to both sides about their interactions on the platform.
Well, you have got from both Maps and myself a full 5-star rating as a guest for today. And as a result, we've got a little something we'd like to give you. Trust is so important. We're entrusting you with 10,000 Rand from Boschendal. And we'd like you to pass it on to a young entrepreneur, a young entrepreneurial space, somewhere where 10,000 Rand is going to be stretched to a lot more than 10,000 Rand, and you think is really going to help somebody who's perhaps following in your footsteps, following an entrepreneurial journey. Who would that be?
Well, firstly, thank you so much. I mean, this is awesome. And so this would be, my nominated entrepreneur would be Gabby Ellerman, who is the CEO and founder of MindJoy. And they are looking at technology to bring education solutions online to young children, starting with coding, but branching out into a number of subjects. And I think she's a very worthy recipient who's building something, again, that's much needed in South Africa.
Cheers to that. I think that's a great selection.
Cheers. Thank you. Thanks.
Cheers.
Well, it sounds like we're sending the money the way of another inspiring woman, and that's exactly what you are. And the paucity of women in tech is still very much there,
Absolutely.
but you've helped to reduce it ever so slightly, and I'm sure you'll continue to do so in years to come. It's a wonderful product, it's a wonderful story, and we're very grateful that you've taken the time to share it with us.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate
Aisha.
it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there we go, from a brief tenure at Accenture, from being a PhD student and playing around with petri dishes and cells, she's now got one of the most extraordinary businesses in South Africa and a perfect example of entrepreneurship in work. I think it's safe to say Aisha Pandor is cleaning up. Cheers.